We're going to advance our thinking. We're going to be joined by Dr. Hill.
Dr. Jason D. Hill, who is a Jamaican-born professor of philosophy at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. And the reasoning this morning in Abridged Nation is all about morality and art. Now hear this though, food for thought. Do great works of art require flawed and cruel personalities? In general, monsters? Or do the monsters who are themselves already great artists have to create great works of art to atone for the horrific creatures they are and the lives they have ruined in the pursuit of their art? Think of people like, this is on the script. This is not me saying it, by the way. People like Vibes Cartel, Buju Banton, Chris Brown, Jack Hure. There's so many.
Yeah.
So just to have this discussion about morality and art, the perfect person to have the reasoning with is none other than Dr. Jason D. Hill. He's with us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
hearing you loud and clear. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Hill. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to be up early.
Lovely. All right. So in terms of background and credits, could you just share with the Bridge Nation some of your credentials and some of the work that you've published?
Well, I was born and raised in Jamaica. I left Jamaica when I was 20, and I used to actually work at the Gleaner. I was one of the young investigative reporters at the Gleaner. And I left Jamaica at 20, went to the States, and did my first degree, my bachelor's in philosophy and English literature, and then went on to do a PhD in philosophy. And I've written 5 books, 3 in the areas of ethics and political philosophy, and a couple commercial books. One was dealing with, the immigrant experience. I wanted to write a book on how immigrants, why Jamaican immigrants in particular, but immigrants happen to do so well in America. That book was called We Have Overcome, an Immigrant's Letter to the American People. And I really got into the stories of people, domestic workers, gardeners, just service workers in Jamaica who went to the States and made it big. I told that story in that book because I really wanted to big up our Jamaican people and show how well they've done in the States. And then I wrote another book on reparations called What Do White Americans Owe Black People? Racial Justice in the Age of Post-Oppression, to question this whole notion of the residual effects of slavery and who's due reparations and who's not due reparations. And so I'm here in Jamaica for a couple of months until January, actually. And doing a lot of writing, and I'm going to be teaching my classes online for the fall. Yeah.
Awesome. So you are not someone who shies away from the tough topics, those deep-seated topics that some people shy away from. You take them head on. And so this morning, I think it is ideal that you help us to dissect this idea of art imitating life or life imitating art. Shells, what would be the first question you'd have for Dr. Hill?
It's simply, Dr. Hill. For me, I studied art. I was a film student. So I believe definitely in the whole vibe of art just being freedom of expression and creativity. Like there's no border. There shouldn't be any. However, especially within our music, we're seeing where the lines are being blurred, where everybody is just so socially conscious right now. Like artists, we don't feel like we have the creative freedom to express ourselves anymore and bring highlight to certain issues in our way. So right now, do you feel like art is being caged because of morality?
Absolutely. Look, I think that if you look at the history of art, going back to antiquity, you will find that art is what I call the product of mutilated egos, twisted egos, in the crucibles of cruelty, in the crucibles of really messed up personalities and characters come the greatest works of art. You notice that nice people that we get along with, happy people, don't usually produce good art. It's usually people who are
twisted,
messed up.
Yeah.
And right. So I think we can't have it both ways. We can't demand that our artists who are trying to work out through their art, the problems in their egos, the problems in their personalities, the traumas that they've experienced in their lives. It is through their art. We're the legatees, we're the beneficiaries of great works of art, because these artists are basically messed up people who are trying to work out through their art their neuroses. And I think we live in a cancel culture where we want to cancel a lot of these artists, because we find out through digging up their biographies or looking at their behaviors that they're really bad, they're really monstrous people. They're the people that we extol and we worship as artists. When we look in their personal lives, we find out that they're not nice, so we want to cancel them. And my thing is, we can't really have it both ways, right? If artists harm people, like R. Kelly, one of the guys that I like, the R&B, right? He's a pedophile. And I've gone on record of saying the man is doing time in jail. Radio should still be playing his music because he's paying for the crimes that he's committed, but he's a great artist. And why should we be so self-righteous and look into ourselves and think that we're exempt? Not that all of us are pedophiles, but look into ourselves and think that we're exempt from any of the kind of traits, the monstrous traits, not to mention the people that we love in our lives, who are horrible people, like sometimes our parents, our children, our friends, right? And judge these people. So yeah, I think we're living in a horrible period of cancel culture where we want to just have it both ways, have our artists be very nice and sweet and then produce great works of art.
So art can be expressed in many different ways, and I love the example that you use, because sometimes when it's too close to home, some people don't want to touch the topic. So we can go with a R. Kelly, who is a little bit more removed from the Jamaican society, and we can look at the work that he has produced, the impact that it had on so many of us, because he's been an icon for so many decades, so many generations. When we look at the work that he has produced, the impact that it has had on society, taken away from the individual, separating the individual from the art. What he has delivered to us is wholesome and uplifting, but then there are circumstances and there are artists who bring the darker side of society to the fore, and sometimes they perpetuate a lifestyle that might not be so wholesome. What would you say to that type of situation? How do we navigate and treat with those artists?
Well, I think, if you look at hip hop music, for example, and there is something, hip hop is now celebrating 50 years. And you look at gangster rap, you look at even dancehall music, there is something about the stories that people are telling about their lives. These stories are not very pretty, but we as a society, look, if you don't like the stories, turn off your radio and don't listen to the music. But what I want to say is that these artists are very often telling a particular story, a narrative about their biography. It's quite often autobiographical, and it's often life-saving. So they're telling a naturalistic story about the conditions under which they live, the conditions under which they are treated by the police, the stratifications in society. Dealing with some of the early artists in Jamaica who told the stories of, like Bob Marley, for example, when you listen to his lyrics, right? And he talked about mental slavery, when he talked about the class system in Jamaica. I think that this is proper, that artists tell not just a story that we want to hear, but they're telling stories that, I'm going to use a big word here, bring discomfort to the listener, because a lot of these artists are about social consciousness and consciousness raising. And that is how a society changes. It's not that the music is telling you what to think or standing up, these artists are standing up on a platform telling you, speaking, thus spake the artist. But consciousness raising is making you feel a little bit disturbed. It's like when you leave a movie theater and you watch a movie about poverty in a certain segment of society, and then you see, on the other hand, people living in extravagant wealth. You think some people are getting $1 a day for work that is done, while some people are getting millions of dollars a year, and you leave feeling that's not right. That is just not right, right? So I think these artists have to be left free to make us feel uncomfortable about our lives. And if we don't like it, we don't have to listen to it. But it is not I want to say this, it is not the job of the artist to make the reader or the listener, if it's a musician, leave always feeling happy and elated. That is what I call frilly pop music, right? But the job of a serious artist is often involved in what I call consciousness raising. And if he or she is really, really serious, on a transformational level, like the work of Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Jimmy Cliff, these people, to go back to the, historical artists in Jamaica, a transformational ethos where you really look at your society and you look at your own consciousness, you look at your own behavior in a radically different way.
Dr. Hill, listen, I have to keep one eye on the clock as I listen to every word that you're saying, and I realize that we're a little over our time, so we're going to have to probably leave the conversation here. I'm seeing from my producer that this is very engaging. So can you stay with us just a few more minutes while we just pay some bills and come right back?
Sure. Absolutely.
All right, let's take the break, Kevin. An intriguing conversation we're having with Dr. Jason D. Hill. We are talking about separating the art from the artiste, the contribution of the artiste to culture, stirring thoughts, sometimes making us uncomfortable, reflecting some of the ills of society. And to conclude the conversation, Shells, you have a few questions for Dr. Hill. Dr. Hill, you're still with us?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, wonderful.
Right, no problem. So, Dr. Hill, it was just one question. It's very interesting. So far in the reasoning, we've been talking about the artists who actually live the life that they're speaking of. You understand me? But what I've realized in the dancehall and of course in the hip hop spaces, there's a narrative going out right now, Dr. Hill, where most of the artists, when they're challenged by interviewers or vloggers, bloggers, whatever, and they're saying to them how your music is affecting people, a lot of these artists are turning around and saying, why don't you view us as like how you'd view a movie star? When you see Keanu Reeves, you're not threatened by Keanu Reeves. You don't see him as a killer, even though he just portrayed a killer in one of his movies. So what I'm saying is it easy for, let's say, a dancehall artist or a hip-hop act to say, hey, I don't really live this life. I'm just pretending. Because I don't feel like those environments for hip-hop and dancehall allow the artist, because it's nice that they're showing a certain side of life, but if they're not really living it, they can't really come out publicly and say, hey, I was just pretending, guys. I'm joking. Is that an interesting way to look at morality and art?
I think so. But one thing I want to say is this, that society has a tendency to criminalize the identities of some of these artists, these hip hop artists, right? So, but what do I mean by that? I mean that Keanu Reeves and Nicole Kidman and Robert De Niro and all these artists can be horrible people. And some of these artists that we know are horrible people and go on to make great movies. But often, at least historically, there's been a separation between their art and their private lives. A lot of hip hop artists are criminalized as human beings, separate and apart from their work. And I think what we should do as critics, as commentators, is make the point that these are also conceptual artists, right? These are people who are using their bodies as vehicles to transmit the lives that they live. They're not, I don't think most of them are actually saying to viewers, oh, come and imitate my life. They're saying, this is the life that I live. This is the life I aspire to live. And the music is a transmission belt by which they convey their message. And one thing we have to remember is that music is the only currency that they have, because otherwise these people are quite voiceless. These are often marginalized and disenfranchised people in society. And the music is the only way that they really have to convey and to communicate their dreams, their aspirations, their traumas. And so I think while we are less likely, I'm not a fan of Kim Kardashian, but I think she is far more dangerous in setting a particular kind of shallow, mindless lifestyle, and people don't want to criticize her, I would, than, let's say, certain hip hop artists. I don't want to call any names, I don't want to single out people, but certain hip hop artists who are the butt of criticisms, but who have some substance, in the sense that when you look at the lives that they have led and how far they've come from those humble beginnings and made something of their lives, The tendency is to stop criminalizing these people's identities. They're human beings. And the music is just a narrative, and their bodies are the vehicles through which they are really. I look at them more as conceptual artists also, and not just as regular artists. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. I do. And finally, Dr. Hill, my parting words for you, sir, because you said you're out here doing some writing as well, some research as well. I'd really love, Shells would really love if you could take a look at, with the same morality and art with our young artists here in Jamaica. A lot of them are getting a bad rap for representing their art.
Yes.
I'd even name drop one to help you. Valiant, for example. You know, you can take a look into
He's a
his
good
music.
guy.
He is a good guy, but when he sings,
I'd probably look at Chronic Law.
same one too. But there's a whole there's a whole
Quite a
pool
number
of them.
artists to choose from.
Chronic Love, Valiant. You can take a look at all of them, Dr. Hill, and you can take a look at what the public is saying about them versus what they say about their art when they're representing their art. And you should have some good information. Trust me, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. And to follow up on the work, you've published the books. Are they available digitally? How do we support your work? How do we get edified by the work that you're putting in?
Well, they're all on Amazon. I think you can get all of them most of them on, at least the most recent ones are all on Kindle on Amazon. Just go on Jason D. Hill, and you can get them on Kindle. And you can also follow me on Substack, jasondamienhill.substack.com. But the books are all available on Amazon. And I will look into these artists because I think that a lot of people who make criticisms of artists don't really have a cultural entree or are not really credentialed insiders. They're not really interested in the literal lives of the artists.
Mm-hmm.
They're just interested as outsiders making criticisms without what I would call being credentialed insiders. That is at least understanding the context in which the artwork itself is being written.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Just on this conversation, I've gleaned a lot, and it has opened my minds to looking and appreciating some of the content and the contributions of these artists. Come and beat them, bud.
Yeah,
I believe in the power of words, and so when you put it out there, but you've given me some insight that makes me appreciate that they have a space and place and a need to express themselves the way they do. So I thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, man.
I want to wish you a
Thank
wonderful day and all the best on the medical situation that might have taken you away from us earlier.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Big up, Dr. Hill.
Till next time. Take care.